skimming is a great strategy when there are a lot of details in a passage, but sometimes you have to rephrase parts of the passage in your own words to be sure you are actually understanding what you are reading. So, how do you know when and what to rephrase? In this particular passage, it is especially important to rephrase to ensure you are distinguishing between what the author is talking about and what the author thinks about what he is talking about. In other words, it is all about keeping track of perspective. And you don't want to rush to a conclusion until you read the conclusion. Let's give it a try.
Conventional wisdom holds that Ford Motor Company decided to rush the Pinto automobile into production to compete with foreign imports despite internal pre-production tests that showed gas tank ruptures and low-speed rear-end collisions would produce deadly fires. This decision purportedly derived from an infamous 7-page cost-benefit analysis that valued human lives at $200,000. Settling burn victims' lawsuits would have cost $49.5 million, far less than the $137 million needed to make minor corrections. According to this account, the company made an informed, cynical, and impressively coordinated decision that payouts to burn victims were more cost-effective than improving fuel tank integrity. This description provides Pinto gas tank decision-making narrative. Okay, so the company decided it was cheaper to settle lawsuits than fix the problem. The Pinto story has become a landmark narrative, a definitive story used to support. The narrative was first stated publicly by investigative journalist Mark Dowie. Dowie essentially makes 3 claims about the Pinto case. The first was that the Pinto was more dangerous than other cars. A Pinto burn victim was awarded a record $125 million. The Pinto was the subject of the largest recall. And Ford was the subject of an unprecedented criminal trial. Okay, so first, a Pinto was more dangerous than other cars. Second, Ford decision-makers were allegedly well aware, refers to crash tests at a top-secret site that conclusively demonstrated the Pinto's safety problem. Okay, so second was just Ford knew that the Pinto was unsafe. And the third claim infers a deliberate and unethical decision to cover up rather than fix the Pinto's defect. This decision flowed from justified in terms of Ford's need for profit. Ford did not fix the defect for 8 years until forced to do so by federal regulations because places a dollar value on human life, said it wasn't profitable to make the changes sooner. Okay, so the third is that Ford decided to cover up the defects.
Okay, so we can see why rephrasing an entire paragraph into just one sentence ensures you are understanding what you are reading. But what do you do when you read a sentence that just doesn't make any sense? Do you keep reading? I mean, how can you rephrase something that you don't understand? Well, you want to note that when you do not quite get it, then keep reading just a little further and see if maybe you can put together from context what the author is trying to say.
This is how the Pinto case is taught to students. The free enterprise imperative of profit maximization is considered the dominant explanatory variable? I don't know what that means, but it sounds important. For decades, the Pinto case has been the landmark narrative used as a prime example of amoral corporate behavior. Oh, okay. So it's just saying that the Pinto case is taught to students as an example of companies choosing profit even over safety. There are critical flaws in this narrative. It is my position that there never was a decision to market an unsafe vehicle. Instead, the Pinto is better understood as a normal outcome of distinct organizational parts embedded in a larger network. Okay, so yes, what happened with the Pinto was bad, but maybe it wasn't done on purpose? I would argue that the generally accepted Pinto narrative suffers from 3 basic flaws. First, available data at the time suggests to Ford engineers the Pinto had a safety profile comparable to other vehicles in its class. Okay, so the author disagrees for 3 reasons, and the first is that Pinto was just as safe as other cars. Second, so Ford was not a monolithic entity with a single objective and universally shared knowledge. Not atypically, one set of Ford employees committed the organization to a particular Pinto design, and an entirely separate group of employees later acted in ways that were constrained by the earlier design actions. Okay, so the second one is maybe not everybody knew all the information. Third, the Pinto narrative ignores Ford's social and institutional environment. Ford was embedded in a network of other automakers, the court system, auto safety organizations, and government agencies, and Ford's actions were typical of the time. Okay, so the third reason is, yes, Ford did bad things, but they were really no worse than other automakers or other companies. For these reasons, I find the Pinto landmark narrative to be flawed. The Pinto narrative, as being related to students and society at large, does not fully realize the entire story. Amoral culprit behavior is not the primary reason, and I would argue not a reason at all, that should be used to explain the case of the Ford Pinto. Okay, so the author does not think that Ford and the Pinto should be used or taught as an example of amoral corporate behavior, which is when a company does a bad thing just for money.
Okay, sure. This passage is about the Pinto, but really this passage is about perspective. The author spends a great deal of time laying out the logic of the Pinto narrative, but it's not as simple as that. There were several hints along the way, and 3 described flaws, but in case you didn't get it, the author's perspective is made clear at the end. The last or conclusion paragraph is where you are supposed to see that the author disagrees with the topic he is describing. You will often find yourself managing passages with multiple perspectives. It is imperative that you distinguish between what the author is writing about and what he thinks about the topic. All right, now go find some passages or articles with multiple perspectives and test out your skimming with rephrasing skills. Happy practicing!